I always believed my home renovation would be simple. New siding, upgraded windows, and a modest deck extension. Everything fully up to code and, more importantly, fully comply with the Pinehurst Estates Homeowners Association. I had dotted every I, crossed every T, and kept all my permits neatly organized in a folder by the front door. What I hadn't planned for was Sandra Wilkins, the self-appointed dictator of our HOA. I first met Sandra 3 years ago when I moved into Pinehurst Estates. She greeted me with a tight, rehearsed smile and handed me a 3-ring binder of HOA rules thicker than some college textbooks. "We have standards here," she'd said, her tone implying I might fall short, "and I personally make sure they're enforced." That was my first hint that Sandra, Karen, as most of the neighbors called her behind closed doors, saw the neighborhood less as a community and more as her personal kingdom. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. My contractors had been working for barely 2 hours when I heard raised voices outside. From my home office window, I saw a woman in a crisp beige pantsuit, oversized sunglasses perched on her nose, wildly gesturing at my confused crew. I didn't need to see her face to know exactly who it was. Before I even stepped outside, her voice cut through the air. "This is absolutely unacceptable. You can't just tear apart a home in our prestigious community without proper authorization." As I approached, my lead contractor, Miguel, visibly relaxed. Sandra, on the other hand, looked furious. "I've already contacted the board members about this travesty," she announced. "All work needs to stop immediately." I stepped forward, offering my most professional smile. "Good morning, Sandra. Is there a problem with my approved renovation?" I deliberately emphasized the word approved. Every document had been submitted months earlier, reviewed by the HOA board, largely controlled by Sandra herself, and approved in writing. I even kept copies of every email exchange. For a brief moment, Sandra looked thrown off by my calm. Then she recovered. "James," she said, my name sounding like an accusation, "this project is completely different from what was submitted. That siding color is sandstone beige, not desert tan as approved. And this deck extension is at least 6 inches larger than specified." I pulled out my phone, opened my files, and turned the screen toward her. "Actually, Sandra, page 3 of the approval specifically lists sandstone beige, and the deck dimensions match the submitted plans exactly. Would you like to measure yourself?" I kept my voice steady, though my pulse was racing. Something told me to start recording, so I casually hit the record button and slipped my phone into my shirt pocket, camera facing outward. Sandra's face flushed red. "Well, the board has reconsidered," she snapped. "We've received complaints from neighbors about how this will affect property values." She glanced around dramatically, though not a single neighbor was in sight. "As HOA president," she continued, "I have the authority to halt any construction that violates community standards." "Which specific standard am I violating?" I asked, genuinely curious. Sandra had a reputation for inventing rules on the spot. "Section 8, paragraph 12, she recited smugly, states that any exterior modification must maintain the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. This clearly doesn't." Miguel shifted uneasily. "Sir, we can't afford to lose a workday. We got materials delivered and a tight schedule." Before I could respond, Sandra turned on him with pure contempt. "You people need to learn that rules matter. If you keep working, I'll call the police and report you for trespassing, and I'll make sure you never get another job in this county again." Her voice dropped to a threatening whisper, but my phone captured every word. I felt a surge of anger, but stayed composed. "Sandra, Miguel and his team are here at my invitation, with valid county permits. They are not trespassing." I lifted the permit folder. "Everything here is approved by both the county and the HOA. I'm happy to walk you through it." She didn't even look. "Those approvals were preliminary," she said flatly. "As president, I have final say, and I say this stops now." She pulled out her phone. "If they don't pack up in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." I nodded slowly, making a decision on the spot. "All right, Sandra, I understand your position." I turned to Miguel and nodded. "Let's pause for today. I'll handle this." The relief on his face was immediate. He didn't need this kind of confrontation. As his crew began securing their tools, I gently guided Sandra toward the street, away from the workers. "I appreciate your dedication to the neighborhood," I said calmly, "but I'm concerned about the threat you just made toward my contractor. That sounded a lot like interference with a lawful business relationship, which could become complicated." I kept my tone casual and non-confrontational. Sandra's eyes narrowed behind her oversized sunglasses. "Are you threatening me, James?" she scoffed. "Because you won't win that battle. My husband plays golf with Judge Harmon, and my sister works for the City Planning Commission. I can turn your renovation into a bureaucratic nightmare that never ends." She smiled, clearly enjoying herself. "So be a good neighbor. Submit a new proposal with the correct colors and dimensions." I smiled back. "I'm not threatening anything, Sandra. Just trying to understand the situation. I'll look into it and get back to you." As she walked away, I heard her mutter something about teaching newcomers a lesson. The moment her spotless white SUV disappeared down the street, I called my cousin Melissa, an attorney who specializes in property law. After I explained everything and sent her the recording, she laughed. "Oh, James," she said, "she just handed you a gift. Interference with a business contract, abuse of HOA authority, and false claims of judicial influence to intimidate you. That's textbook harassment and possibly extortion." Following Melissa's advice, I spent the next day gathering evidence. I collected written statements from 3 neighbors who'd experienced similar behavior from Sandra. I reviewed the HOA bylaws, which clearly stated that once a project is approved, it can only be revoked by a full board vote with proper notice. I also compiled emails showing Sandra had repeatedly blocked homeowners' projects without any board involvement. By the next morning, I was ready. When Sandra returned, this time flanked by 2 other board members, I was waiting with my folder and my phone recording again. Alan and Patricia, the other board members, looked uncomfortable, like they'd been dragged into something they didn't fully understand. "James," Sandra announced smugly, "the board has held an emergency meeting and determined your project must stop immediately. We prepared a formal cease and desist letter." I accepted it with a polite nod. "Thank you, Sandra. Before you go, there's something I'd like you all to hear." I played the recording from the previous day. As Sandra's threats filled the air, Alan and Patricia's expressions shifted from confusion to visible shock. When the audio ended, I spoke quietly. "Sandra, I filed a police report regarding your threats against my contractor. I've also submitted a formal complaint to the district attorney concerning your interference with a lawful business relationship and misuse of HOA authority." Sandra's face drained of color. "You were recording me? That's illegal." "Actually," I replied, "this is a one-party consent state, and the HOA bylaws, which I've reviewed carefully, don't prohibit recording conversations on my own property." I turned to Alan and Patricia. "I've also requested an emergency board meeting to address what appears to be a pattern of abusive behavior." Alan cleared his throat. "I think that would be appropriate. We weren't aware of the full context here." Sandra's composure finally cracked. "This is absurd. I've spent years maintaining standards in this neighborhood. You can't seriously believe I've done anything wrong." 2 weeks later, I sat in the Pack Community Center as that special meeting came to a close. Neighbors stood up one by one, sharing their own stories of intimidation and overreach. The district attorney's office had officially opened an investigation based on my recording and the supporting evidence. The vote was swift, 6-1. Sandra was removed as HOA president, and from the board entirely. The HOA also voted to cover my legal expenses and issue a formal apology. As the interim president announced the decision, Sandra stood abruptly, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. "This is a travesty," she snapped. "I've given everything to this community. You'll regret this, all of you." Her voice cracked as she grabbed her designer handbag and stormed toward the exit. At the door, she turned back and jabbed a finger in my direction. "Especially you, James. This isn't over." Then the door slammed shut, the echo lingering in the suddenly silent room.